Hey guys, and welcome to the video, or should I say video series. Yes, all of the videos in this entire playlist are dedicated to Server 2016 and System Center 2016. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually build an entire test lab from scratch. We're going to be doing it in a virtual environment, which you can follow along at home if you wish. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a vanilla Server 2016 instance to start with. We are going to put Active Directory on it, do DNS, DHCP. We're also going to attempt to use MDT Update 1 to do high-speed deployments of Server 16 to actually aid the deployment of the System Center components. So once that's done, we will then set up a SQL 16 instance. Once that's ready, we will then start building all of the individual components of System Center onto that very database. So we're going to be looking at Configurations Manager, Operations Manager, Service Manager, DPM, Orchestrator, all of the wonderful fun stuff that System Center has to offer. And the beauty about it is we're going to do it from scratch. Now, please remember, this is technical preview version 2, which means it's full of bugs, probably crash and won't work, but we'll try our best. So let's see how it's done.
Right, so off we go. So first thing we're going to do is build our very first server. So we're going to open up Hyper-V. Now what we're going to do is create a virtual machine. We're going to call it DC01. We're going to store it into a different location and put it into there. Now this is being written out to an SSD. Also the ISOs themselves sit on a different SSD. So the reason for doing that is basically so we get the fastest deployment possible with the least number of fast forwarding. So we'll build it on a Gen 2 VM. We'll assign it 4 gig of RAM because it is only an Active Directory box, so we don't need to go too crazy on the memory. In fact, even 4 gigs probably an overkill, but we'll just do that just to get it going. Select the network. We'll use the standard 127 gig drive because it's dynamically expanding anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much. And what we'll do is we will go give it an ISO. Now here we are, version 10074 there. So that's what we're going to boot off of. So now that's created, what we'll do is, just so we get a quicker deployment, is we'll just ramp up the CPUs a bit. This is mainly just for the purposes of the video. I would normally just use 2 processors. So let's turn it on and see what happens. So we are booting up into the standard menus, change language to UK and install now. So setup is starting, so that's a good sign. Right, now what we'll do is we'll use the one with the local admin tools primarily, so that we have all those tools available to us. But hit next, agree to the terms. We're not doing an upgrade, it's a fresh install, so we do custom. We're going to write it to the blank drive that we just created and let that go through. Now this normally only sort of takes a couple of minutes really. So obviously 1, 3, 5. So we'll just let that plow through, and thanks to the magic of video editing, we'll come back when that has finished. Right guys, so that's now set up, and that's taken literally just a couple of minutes to sort of go through, so that's not too bad. User's password must be changed, so we'll just set a password. So once we've all booted up for the first time, so we go to login, we get presented with the shell box and traditional service manager, which looks the same as Server 2012 R2. Now we've got a few things to do first of all before we install Active Directory. So what you want to do is go to local server. We are going to change the name. Now you can do this on command line, or you can do it in here. So what we'll do first of all is we will set the IP address as static, and the reason being is it's going to be a DHCP box as well as a domain controller. So if you have a DHCP address, domain controllers don't like that. It needs to be static. So what we'll do is we'll just click on that, and that launches this command menu. So what we'll do is we go into press 8, and we need to select the network interface that we're going to use, which is 1. Then we need to set the network address, which is 1, and we're going to set it to static, so press S for static, and then that asks us for the address, which was what was the one that DHCP gave us? 192.168.1.113. Subnet mask is 255.255.255.0, and the default gateway is 192.168.1.254. The default gateway is the IP address of your router, so this is the way out of your network. So you set that to whatever yours is on your side. So that is set now. Now, what we need to do now is go back to the main menu. Now, you'll also need to enable remote desktop because it's disabled as default. So if you press 7 and then just say E for enable that, and then press option 1. And that's that done. Now we can also change the computer name here as well, so we will, as we're already here. So we'll press 2, and we will call it 16 DC01. So all of our servers across our entire lab are going to begin with 16. So I already have a network running at home, so this is just to identify so I don't get any conflicts with names and things like that. So I know what's server 16 and what's not. So we'll do that, and it's going to ask us for a reboot, which it has, so you must restart. So it's a pretty quick process. So let that come up on the new name. So we've set the name, set the IP address, so we're now ready to install Active Directory. So wait for that to come up. So we go to add roles and features. Yes, hurry up. There we go. Right, so we need to install a role on that particular server, and you want to select Active Directory Domain Services, so that'll actually get that up and going, and that's selected various prerequisites that need to be installed as well. So we just say yes to that. Now, some people like to install DNS as well and get that all configured. It depends upon the complexity of your environment. This is just a small lab, so we're not going to use, we're not going to select the DNS ourselves. We'll let the installer add that feature and configure it itself. But what we are going to do is we're going to add in a DHCP server. So just accept that as well. So we're going to leave that one blank. But once AD's gone through, it will install it itself. So we don't need any of the features here for Active Directory to work. So we just say next. So it's asking us to configure DHCP, which we'll do later. And we also want to restart if required because it's a lab, we don't care. And off it goes. Now this whole process takes about 10 minutes or so, even on an SSD. Due to the way it installs it all, it then reboots and comes up on the domain, and then it has to build a profile, and it's the building of the profile that actually seems to take its time. So be patient, it hasn't crashed, so we'll come back as soon as it's done. So from the server manager, so we go up to the little flag. So this is telling us things that need to be done. So we've got DHCP configuration to complete, and we've also got to promote it to a domain controller. This is the bit that takes the time. So we'll do that. So what we'll do is we'll create a new forest because it's a brand new domain. So it does need to be fully qualified, so we'll call it 16elm.local. Hit next. Now functional level, because it's our lab, we will use server 16 functional level. We'll install the DNS global catalog, and we'll also set the Active Directory password. Yes, that's fine. So it has to have a little think, and it should pick 16elm on its own. And it has, good. Hit next. So this is the location of where Active Directory database files are going to go. So I'm happy with the defaults, so we'll hit next. And this is just giving us a list, a summary job of what to do. Now, also the beauty of Server 16 is it does PowerShell, so you can replicate the settings, and you can do view script, and it shows you there. Now, if you ran that in a PowerShell window on another server, you don't need to use the GUI, and it will just go through and replicate exactly what we've just set up here. So hit next, because we've got no other domain controllers to build, so we don't need to worry about that. So it's currently verifying that it's happy to become a domain controller, which it looks like it's not. Yep, that's fine. Delegation's fine. Oh, right, okay, so prerequisite checks have completed, which is good. And prerequisites have all passed. So the delegation of DNS server cannot be created because basically we haven't got DNS installed. It's going to do it itself, so you don't need to worry about that. And then hit install. So it'll go through, shows the same errors again, and then go through installing. So we'll be right back. So we're fully rebooted and we're now on the domain. So we're just going to log in as that address. So if we go to local server, we should see we're now part of a domain, 68L local, and our name is correct as well. So the one thing as well, what we'll do is we'll enable Windows Update, which also brings a command box. So it's one thing that we forgot to do before. So we set option 5, and we set to automatic, so press A. Enable automatic updates. Yep, fine. Okay, and then exit that, so 15. Okay, so what have we got left? So we've got to configure DHCP now. Now the reason why we're using DHCP is because we're using it to do deployments later on in the course. If you are just using the system center stuff and you're just using your router to issue IP addresses, then you don't need to do this step. So So hit next. So we will use the administrator. Okay, commit. And then close. So once we go back into Server Manager, what you need to do then is to bring up the DHCP manager and define the first scope for the domain. So if you go into IPv4 and we go into right click on IPv4 and then go to new scope, say next. So we'll call it test lab. The addresses that we will use will be 192.168.1. We'll use 130 192.168.1.160. So that gives us 30 addresses to play with. So we're not going to do any exclusions. We're going to let it lease for 8 hours. Yes, configure it now. So we need to put the address in of the gateway. So 192.168.1.254. So this is the address of your route out. So hit next. We need to put the name of our DNS server in, so this will actually test that DNS resolution is working. So we'll type in 16DC01 and then hit resolve, and it should return the IP address, which it does. So we'll say add, so it's just validating, which is good, it's worked. So hit next. We're not using WINS in this lab, so hit next and then activate the scope. So there's a scope there. There's no leases because it hasn't. We haven't got anything in the lab yet. So, but later on down the line, we will be enabling PXE, and so you know the PXE pre-environment execution, so you can F12 and boot from your network, and it knows where to go. So later on in the course, we're going to be looking at SCCM, and this is where this comes into play. And these particular options are set here in the scope options here. So we've got router DNS and domain name. So if you want to add bits and pieces to it, you just go to configure options, go down to 66, and there we have the boot name there, and 67. So that's where we'd configure all the PXE stuff. We're not going to do it just now because it's not part of this video. And so we've got 31 addresses available to us, in use none, so that's good. Okay, so what we'll do now that that's running, what we'll do is we'll spin up the next VM for video number 2, because we're going to be building a SQL 16 box. So I'm just going to spin it up now and just making sure that we can actually join that server to our new domain that we've just created, making sure that all that works, and also make sure it actually gets an IP address from the DHCP that we just configured. So I'm just going to configure that up now. I'll be right back. So I built another VM. This is going to be our SQL server, which we're going to use in the next video. So we'll just connect to that one and just log into that. Wait for it to bring up the server manager. So what we need to do is just prove that that's pulled an IP address. So DHCP is there, so we'll switch over to our domain controller and log into that. We'll bring up the DHCP manager. So we'll go into there, go into IP4, and we'll go into the scope that we created and address leases. And as we can see, there it is. So that's the server that we built. Okay, so we'll switch over to our domain box, and we just go to tools and bring up Active Directory users and computers. And what we'll do is we'll create our first domain admin user. So what we'll do here is we'll just go new user, and we will call this Rich Smith. So the username, so we'll call this one Rich Smith. Set the password. Don't change. Oops. Don't change. Cannot change. Never expires. And we'll also create an enterprise admin as well, because we'll need that in later videos to do schema extensions on Active Directory and so forth. So we'll call this Super Rich. So we'll call this Super Rich Smith. That's right, isn't it? Next. Set password. Not expire. Next, finish. So what we'll do is we go into that first user. We say at the moment it's part of the domain users. We need to make it a domain admin and able to give it privileges across the domain. So we just type in domain add. Should bring it up. There you go. Domain admins. There it is. There. Look. So we hit apply. And for Super Rich, we need to do enterprise admins. So I assume you just type in enter. There you go, enterprise admins. And we'll just do that for later on. So what we'll do is we'll swap back over to our SQL box. Go to the workgroup or computer name, whichever. Click on that. Go to change, and we will give it a name, which is SC. Actually, we call it 16 SC SQL 01, and we'll add it to 16 elm.local. So we put in our domain user account. So Rich Smith. And the password, and it should say welcome to the domain. Hey! And it needs to do the usual reboots and so forth. So that machine is now on the domain, so we know that our Active Directory domain is working. We know that DHCP is working as well, because we could see the IP address in the scope. And that concludes the end of our first video. Please join me again on the next video, where we're going to build SQL 16 on the new server. Hope to see you soon. Bye bye.